So picture this. You are driving through a neighborhood where the grass isn't just green. It is this very specific, heavily regulated shade of emerald.
Right, the
Yeah.
kind of place where a single dandelion is a scandal.
Exactly. And the silence there, it's heavy. It isn't peaceful at all. It's pressurized, like the air itself is holding its breath.
That is a very specific kind of suburban anxiety you're describing. It's the silence of surveillance, really, not solitude.
You nailed it. It is that exact feeling where seeing a minivan with just a little smudge of dirt on the bumper
Okay.
feels like some sort of moral failing.
Which is exhausting.
Totally exhausting. We were talking about Brunswick, New Jersey today. That is the setting of our source material. And honestly, it feels like someone took the Stepford Wives, threw in a dash of Desperate Housewives, and then, just unleashed an 80s slasher villain with a very specific grudge.
Which is a terrifying cocktail. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the original The Stepford Wives, whether that's the R11 novel or the movies, it is important to ground ourselves in that reference right away.
Oh, for sure.
Stepford was all about men replacing their wives with compliant, beautiful robots because they simply couldn't handle their independence. It was a critique of losing agency in exchange for aesthetic perfection.
Right. And in today's deep dive, we are looking at the horror novel Dollface by Lindy Ryan.
A fantastic read.
It really is. And it takes that exact concept of aesthetic perfection and weaponizes it in a completely different way. Because instead of men doing it to women, we are looking at women doing it to each other.
And doing it to themselves.
Yes. So our mission for this deep dive is to break down exactly how this book uses the slasher genre to critique that intense pressure of perfection. We aren't just talking about a murder mystery here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about makeovers that literally turn fatal.
We're talking about the abject, the gross, messy reality of the human body violently invading these pristine, manicured suburbs.
But before we get to the blood, and trust me, there is a lot of it, we have to meet our protagonist. Everyone, I want to introduce you to Jill Marshall.
Jill is such a great entry point for the story because she is already an outsider from page one. She is a horror author.
Which I just love as a setup. It's so clever. She just moved from Houston to this picture-perfect New Jersey suburb with her husband, Rob.
Right, he's a Coast Guard officer.
Yeah, and they have their son, Tanner, and their dog, Lugosi.
Named after Bela Lugosi, naturally.
Naturally. Because Jill sees the entire world through a horror lens. She is constantly referencing tropes. She talks about Final Girls. She references Psycho, The Shining.
It gives the whole book this brilliant meta layer. The character knows she is in a spooky situation. She knows the rules of the genre.
That's the Scream influence, right? The self-aware protagonist.
Exactly. But I think there is a crucial difference here with Jill. Usually, the meta character uses that knowledge to stay safe. They say, I won't go into the basement because that's where the killer always hides.
Right. They avoid the danger.
But Jill knows the rules perfectly well, but her trauma compels her to break them anyway.
Wow. Yeah. Let's unpack that trauma, because it really is the engine of the entire book. Jill isn't just a fan of horror. She is a survivor of it.
She is heavily defined by a deeply traumatic event from her childhood.
Yeah, involving her mother. This is what the book calls Chapter 0. And we need to spend a moment here just because the imagery is so specific and so disturbing.
It's devastating. Jill's mother committed suicide when Jill was very young. But it wasn't just a quiet death. It was a literal tableau.
The book describes it so vividly. Jill and her younger sister, Kitty, they find their mother in a closet. And there's red lipstick involved.
Yes. The mother had essentially stitched herself together with this red lipstick. She had drawn dotted lines all over her skin.
Like around her neck and her wrist.
Her joints, everywhere. It creates this horrific visual of a woman trying to fix herself or perhaps marking herself for cutting, the way a plastic surgeon marks a patient before surgery.
That image of the dotted line is just so powerful. It suggests that the body is just a project.
Exactly. Something to be altered, cut, or removed entirely.
It's the ultimate expression of body dysmorphia and self-hatred, but externalized through an everyday beauty product.
Right, because lipstick is supposed to make you look alive or attractive, but here it literally marks the site of death. And Jill was the one who found her.
She was the one who had to step up. She raised Kitty. She made this promise to her little sister, saying, I will take care of you.
And that promise creates a profound, almost toxic codependency between them. Jill acts as the ultimate shield.
She absorbs all the trauma to protect Kitty.
She does. She becomes the responsible one, the strong one. But internally, she is completely fractured. She writes horror novels as a coping mechanism. It's a way to control the fear, to put the monsters on a page where she can manage them.
But now, In Brunswick, she's trying to pivot. She moved there for a fresh start. She's actually trying to write a new book, something tentatively about dolls in space. But she is just totally blocked.
Which makes sense. And that concept, dolls in space, is such a brilliant metaphor for what Jill actually wants in her life.
How so?
Well, think about horror. Horror is earthy. It's blood, dirt, dark basements, buried bodies. But space. Space is clean. It's a vacuum. It is distant and sterile.
Oh, I see.
Jill wants to take the dolls, meaning the women, the societal expectations, her own trauma, and blast them into a vacuum where they simply can't hurt her anymore. She wants to be uncontained.
That is such a great read on that detail. But instead of the sterile safety of space, she lands in Brunswick. And immediately, she runs smack into the antagonists of our story.
The Brunswick Elementary PTA.
Yes, these women are terrifying in a way that no monster in a rubber mask could ever be.
They really are. They are the true gatekeepers of suburban terror.
You have Maribel, who is the undisputed queen bee.
Yeah.
Then Kellen, Sasha, Beth, and Rosa.
Rosa the librarian who never forgets a face.
Exactly. And they are judgmental, they are intensely cliquey, and they are straight up mean.
Psychologically, they represent the societal superego. They are the enforcers of the rules. In a place like Brunswick, beauty isn't just about looking nice.
It's about compliance.
Precisely. It is about falling in line. If you don't have the right hair, the right car, or the right clothes, you are signaling that you don't belong to the tribe. You become a threat to their carefully maintained order.
And the person who is the absolute biggest threat to them, like the ultimate glitch in their perfectly manicured matrix, is Jill's neighbor, Darla Lashet.
Darla is such a crucial character in this dynamic. She is that abject element I mentioned earlier. She represents everything Brunswick is desperately trying to repress.
She totally is.
Yeah.
She is overly friendly, she has zero boundaries, and her fashion sense is completely stuck in a time warp.
We're talking acid-washed jeans,
Big perms,
blue eyeshadow.
all of it, which immediately marks her as an outsider. But there's something else going on with her, too. Darla is deeply obsessed with this new multi-level marketing beauty brand called Dollface.
We absolutely have to talk about the MLM aspect of this book. Using a pyramid scheme as a central plot point in a horror novel is just genius satire.
Right, it works so perfectly.
MLMs, specifically beauty MLMs, prey on the exact same insecurities that the horror genre exploits. They target women who feel isolated or less than.
They sell this false promise of fixing yourself. Like, buy this makeup kit and you'll be beautiful. Sell this kit to your friends and you'll be rich and popular.
It is entirely built on predatory friendship. The subtext is always, I am acting like your friend right now only because I want to sell you something.
Yes. And Darla is just so desperate for connection. She keeps trying to host these Dolls Night sales parties at her house, inviting all the PTA moms.
And they bully her relentlessly for it.
They are so cruel. They mock her baking, they make fun of her appearance right to her face, and they flat out refuse to show up to her parties.
And Jill, being the decent human being she is, befriends Darla.
Though, let's be honest, it is mostly out of pity at first, but also because Darla is quite literally the only person in the neighborhood being nice to her.
True. But as the reader, you start getting this creeping sense that something is off with Darla.
Just a little too eager.
Exactly. A little too obsessed with fixing things. She has this bizarre collection of vintage kitchen tools that she keeps absolutely pristine. And she talks about the PTA moms with this unsettling mix of admiration and absolute venom.
And that is exactly where the horror starts kicking in. Because this isn't just a domestic drama about mean moms. People actually start dying. And the way they die is incredibly specific.
It all kicks off with the inciting incident at the Dream Bean Cafe.
Which is a great name, by the way. Very suburban fantasy.
Very much so.
So Jill is at this PTA brunch, and a barista named Barb is just incredibly rude to Darla. She basically shames Darla in public for ordering a pastry, making this really snide comment about carbs.
It's that subtle, passive-aggressive cruelty that women are often subjected to.
Exactly. And in response, Darla makes this very quiet, very weird comment to Jill about feasting on your enemies.
Which Jill takes as a dark joke.
Yeah.
Because that is what we do socially. We de-escalate uncomfortable moments. We assume our neighbors aren't literal psychopaths.
But then, that very night, Barb is found dead behind the cafe. Her throat is completely slit.
And the specific details of the crime scene are vital for understanding the beauty as horror theme. Barb had a tattoo of a slice of cake on her neck.
And the killer targeted that exact spot.
Right through the cake tattoo. And the police determined that the weapon used was a serrated blade. like a bread knife.
Or a cake knife.
Exact.
It's so deeply domestic. That is what makes it so scary. It's not a machete or a chainsaw. It's a cake knife. And later on, Jill notices that Darla smells strongly like silver polish.
As if she's been meticulously cleaning good silverware.
Right.
This establishes the killer's pattern immediately. The killer is taking the tools of domesticity, the very tools used to serve, to host, to be a good suburban woman, and turning them into instruments of murder.
It's like a violent rebellion against the domestic sphere.
Or, conversely, a violent enforcement of it.
Oh, that's a chilling thought. And the violence escalates so fast. The attacks start targeting the specific PTA moms who are mean to Darla, and every single attack is themed around fixing them or improving them in some twisted way.
Let's look at the attack on Maribel, the queen bee. She skips doll's night party, giving this flimsy excuse that she needs her beauty rest.
Which is such a classic blow-off. So what happens? The killer breaks into her house while she's sleeping and stabs her in the head with gardening shears.
Pruning the old growth, as it were. Maribel actually survives the attack, but she requires extensive brain surgery.
It's a brutal literalization of the social metaphor.
Exactly. Maribel was the head of the social group, so the killer attacked her head. She was the one constantly pruning the socialists to keep the undesirables out, so she was the one who got pruned.
That makes perfect sense. But the attack that really gets under my skin is Kellen. This is where the book leans fully into visceral body horror.
You're talking about the ice cream social attack.
Yes. Kellen is attacked right after a school ice cream social, and she is found with her eyes scooped out.
Scooped out with a vintage gelato scoop.
A gelato scoop. I mean, it makes you cringe just thinking about the mechanics of that. And the connection is that Darla collects vintage kitchen tools. Jill had actually seen Darla proudly showing off that exact same scoop earlier in the book.
Again, it's the literalization of a concept. The critical gaze.
Mm-hmm.
Kellen was always looking down on Darla. She was the one eyeing everyone up and down, constantly judging their worth based on appearances.
So the killer literally removed the offending organ.
Yes. It is highly symbolic, but executed in the most gruesome, practical way possible. And just think about the sound of that. It is meant to be completely visceral.
Absolutely. It's nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
And then there's Sasha. Sasha had publicly criticized Darla's cheap decorations at a church event. So Sasha is attacked at the church, and she is scalped.
Using a battery-powered hand sander.
A sander. The logic being to smooth her out. It's like body horror meets Home Depot.
It's a very industrial kind of violence. It entirely dehumanizes the victim. It treats a human being like a piece of old furniture that needs to be stripped and refinished.
Like, you have rough edges. I will sand them down for you.
Precisely. It connects right back to that relentless idea of perfection. The killer's logic is, if you cannot be perfect naturally, I will force you to be perfect mechanically.
And finally, we have Rosa, the librarian. She is drowned in an apple-bobbing barrel at the school's Halloween carnival, which is called the Boogie Bash.
Which is such a classic horror movie trope, drowning in plain sight in the midst of a loud celebration.
So we have a very clear pattern emerging. The mean girls are being systematically picked off or maimed one by one. And Jill is living right in the middle of this. She's a horror author, so how does she cope? She tries to impose narrative structure on the chaos. She literally builds a murder board in her home office.
She's trying to play the detective. She's trying to gain some sort of intellectual control over a terrifying situation.
And on her board, everything points directly to Darla. I mean, look at the evidence. Darla has the clear motive, which is revenge for the relentless bullying. Darla has the means. She owns the shears, the scoop, the sander.
Plus the proximity. Darla is always right there, lingering on the edges of every scene.
And the mask. We haven't even talked about the killer's mask yet.
The mask is crucial.
The killer wears this incredibly creepy vintage Ben Cooper-style plastic doll mask. It is painted blonde hair and a little beauty mark. It is very uncanny valley. And Jill actually finds this exact mask hanging on a bush outside her window.
A clear threat.
And then later, she sees it sitting in the back seat of Darla's car.
That feels like the ultimate smoking gun. In any standard mystery novel, that is the exact moment you lock your doors and call the police.
Right. And on top of all that, Jill does some digging and finds out that the previous homeowner, Patty, actually had a restraining order against Darla. So Darla has a documented history of stalking behavior. It seems like a totally open and shut case. Jill is 100% convinced she is living next door to a suburban serial killer.
But we really have to pause and consider Jill's mental state here. She is terrified, yes, but she is also projecting massively. She is desperately looking for a villain that fits the story she already understands. The crazy neighbor is a trope she knows inside and out. It's manageable, it's safe, in a psychological way, because the threat remains strictly outside of her own house.
Oh, that is so true. And she has a foil in all of this, her husband, Rob.
Rob is the voice of reason. He is the ultimate skeptic. He keeps telling Jill she is spiraling out of control. He literally says to her, "We are not living in a slasher movie."
He represents the logical, everyday world trying to push back against Jill's horror logic.
Which is a very effective narrative device by the author. Because as the reader, you actually start to doubt Jill's perspective. You wonder, is she a reliable narrator?
Right, like, is she seeing patterns that aren't really there just because her brain is wired for trauma?
Or is she the only one seeing the truth because she's the only one who knows how these stories inevitably end?
It creates this amazing friction between suburban logic, where neighbors are maybe just eccentric or quirky but not murderers, and slasher logic, where literally everyone is a suspect waiting to strike.
And while Jill is completely fixated on Darla as the threat outside, we really need to talk about the other major presence in Jill's life. Because the call is coming from inside the house, so to speak.
Yes, her sister Kitty.
Kitty is such a fascinating character study because she is the exact mirror image of Jill.
Totally. Jill is dark, she's anxious, she wears oversized horror t-shirts, she actively avoids wearing makeup. But Kitty is a literal beauty influencer. She lives the van life. She is completely obsessed with social media, posting selfies and talking about manifesting her reality.
She represents the absolute extreme of toxic positivity. Where Jill actively represses the trauma of their mother's gruesome death, Kitty seems to be trying to overwrite it completely with Instagram filters and ring lights.
She aestheticizes everything in her life.
Yes, even her van life isn't real grit or independence. It is a highly curated, sanitized performance of freedom for her followers.
But there's something deeply unsettling about Kitty from the start. She keeps popping up in Brunswick unannounced. She's intensely obsessed with getting Jill's attention. And then she starts doing this Halloween makeup series on her social media channels.
And this is exactly where the real clues start hiding in plain sight.
Yes. One of the looks Kitty posts online is a scary clown with a slit throat, which perfectly mimics the first Murder Barb the barista.
It is such a chilling detail to read. Jill sees this post and is disturbed by it naturally, but she immediately dismisses it.
Why? Because it's just her little sister.
Yeah.
It's just Kitty being edgy for views. Kitty is annoying, not dangerous.
Jill's psychological blind spot here is massive, and it all goes back to that childhood promise. I will take care of you. You simply don't suspect the person you have dedicated your entire life to protecting.
And then there's the scene where Kitty visits Jill. She shows up at the house in Brunswick and absolutely insists on giving Jill a makeover.
This scene is arguably the most pivotal psychological moment in the entire book. Kitty sits Jill down, and she opens up her makeup kit, which, by the way, is a vintage caboodle.
Oh, the caboodle. I'm so glad you brought that up. We have to pause for the nostalgia factor. The book describes this caboodle in such loving, tactile detail. The pastel pink and teal trays unfolding. The very specific clicking sound of the plastic latch snapping open.
It instantly transports you back to being a teenager in a very specific era. Nostalgia is a very powerful drug.
It is. But here, that nostalgia is completely weaponized. Kitty starts applying the makeup to Jill. But she isn't trying to make Jill look like a better version of herself.
She makes Jill look like a doll.
Heavy, unnatural rouge. Exaggerated, painted-on features. And when Jill finally looks in the mirror, she doesn't see her own face. She sees their dead mother staring back at her.
That is a massive, violent psychological breach. Kitty isn't just playing dress-up with her big sister. She is deliberately reenacting their core trauma. She is forcing Jill to look directly at the very thing Jill has spent her entire adult life trying not to see.
It feels so aggressive. It is Kitty basically saying, you cannot ignore me, and you cannot ignore what happened to us in that closet.
She is literally painting the ghost of their mother onto Jill's face.
It is so creepy.
Yeah.
And it perfectly sets the stage for the climax, the boogie bash.
The school Halloween party, which is the absolute classic horror finale setting. You have high stakes, masks everywhere, loud music, chaotic lighting, total confusion.
It's the perfect storm. Jill goes to the school, and she is terrified. She is entirely convinced that Darla is coming there to kill her. She thinks this is going to be the final girl showdown with the crazy neighbor.
And to make matters worse, Kitty forces Jill to dress up for the party.
Right, in matching ragdoll costumes. It is deeply humiliating for Jill, but she does it anyway just to appease Kitty. Again, playing right into that protector dynamic. I'll wear the stupid costume so Kitty feels happy and safe.
So they are at the school. The atmosphere is totally chaotic. Jill inevitably gets separated from the crowd. She finds herself cornered alone in the dark school cafeteria.
And this is where the narrative completely pivots. Jill looks up and sees Darla approaching her through the shadows. And Darla is holding a weapon.
Well, what Jill perceives as a weapon, it's actually a giant silver spoon, a prop from some ridiculous cereal box costume.
Which is objectively ridiculous, but in the panic of the moment, Jill sees it as deadly. She thinks, this is it? Darla is going to scoop my eye out just like she scooped Kellen's.
But then the twist happens.
The twist that recontextualizes the entire book.
Kitty steps out of the shadows, and Kitty is completely covered in blood.
Real blood, not stage blood, not some special effects makeup tutorial.
Yeah.
Real human blood.
And she is holding a paper cutter blade, you know the kind, those heavy, heavy guillotine blades you see bolted to tables in schools and offices.
A literal physical tool of cutting and cropping.
Exactly. The metaphor is incredibly sharp there.
No pun intended.
Right. And Kitty reveals that she has just murdered Rosa, the librarian. She ground her in the apple barrel we mentioned earlier, and she also killed Principal Hart. She sawed his neck with the paper cutter blade.
Kitty is the Dollface killer.
It hits the reader like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, all that evidence against Darla, complete red herrings.
The mask in Darla's car. Kitty planted it there. The motive. It had absolutely nothing to do with revenge for the PTA moms bullying Darla.
Well, not revenge for Darla's sake anyway. It was a deeply twisted form of possessiveness over Jill.
Let's really unpack Kitty's motive here, because psychologically it is deeply messed up. She is driven by intense jealousy. She's jealous of Jill's new life for Brunswick. She's jealous of Jill's husband, her son, and even her weird new friendship with Darla.
If you look at the psychology of a narcissist, it all tracks perfectly. Kitty felt ignored. Remember their shared backstory? Jill was the one who physically found the mother's body. Jill was the one who took charge of the aftermath.
Right.
Kitty felt like she was just a passive spectator to her own family tragedy. She didn't get the spotlight. So now she wants to be the main character. She wants to write and direct the scene herself.
She views the murders as literal content. She's directing a horror movie just for Jill. She targeted those specific women to frame Darla, to get Darla arrested and out of the way, so that Jill would have literally no one left to rely on but Kitty.
I will take care of you. That was the foundational promise of their relationship. Kitty wants to violently force that dynamic back into existence. Her logic is, if Jill's life is destroyed, if she is isolated, terrified, and broken, then she needs Kitty again.
She becomes dependent.
Exactly. It is a psychological variation of Munchausen by proxy. But instead of making Jill physically sick to care for her, Kitty is turning Jill's entire world into a slaughterhouse so she can be the savior.
That is so dark. And the violence itself, Kitty explicitly views it as giving these women makeovers. She's exposing their insides. She's aggressively removing the flaws of these suburban women.
It creates this terrifying thematic parallel between the Dollface MLM company and Kitty herself. The MLM preys on women's insecurities to sell them a product. Kitty preys on the women physically to sell Jill a narrative.
Both are fundamentally saying the same thing. You are broken, and I'm the only one who can fix you.
Exactly.
So we finally reach the physical confrontation. Kitty attacks Jill, and she specifically tries to slice Jill's throat. She is actively trying to recreate the exact imagery of their mother's suicide.
She wants to complete the aesthetic image. She needs Jill to match the mother to finish her masterpiece.
She actually manages to cut Jill's hand and her neck. It is this brutal, desperate physical struggle between sisters. And Jill finally realizes, in that moment, that she cannot talk Kitty down. Kitty is way too far gone. She's entirely living inside her own delusional movie script.
And just when it looks like Jill is going to lose and become the final tragic victim wham,
The giant spoon.
the Chekhov's gun of the cafeteria.
Yes. Darla, out of nowhere, Darla hits Kitty over the head with a giant silver prop spoon.
It is the absolute perfect redemption moment. It breaks the unbearable tension with something so absurd yet so genuinely heroic.
It really is great. It turns out Darla was never a killer. She is just a very socially awkward, slightly obsessive friend who desperately wanted to help Jill fit in.
And she actually figured out the mystery. Darla realized Kitty was the killer because she was closely examining the background of one of Kitty's social media posts. She saw the Ben Cooper mask sitting in the background of a video.
She was basically cyber-stalking her new friend's sister.
Exactly. And because she was paying such close attention, unlike Jill, who was blinded by her own protective instincts, Darla spotted the one clue that Jill completely missed.
So Darla genuinely saves the day. Kitty is arrested and eventually institutionalized. The scene of her being carried away, still wearing her blood-soaked ragdoll costume, completely unhinged, is incredible.
And the ultimate resolution of the book is surprisingly wholesome, albeit in a very dark, blood-spattered way. Jill and Darla actually remain friends.
The mean girls are all either dead or severely maimed. The entire toxic social hierarchy of the Brunswick PTA is completely destroyed, and Jill and Darla are the only ones left standing in the rubble.
It brilliantly flips the script on the entire concept of female friendship. The book systematically sets you up to think that the weird, tacky outcast is the villain, and that the beautiful, supportive sister is the ally. But the reality is the exact opposite.
It is such a sharp critique of surface-level beauty. Kitty was absolutely perfect on the outside. She had the filters, the makeup, the aesthetic lifestyle, but she was completely rotten and empty on the inside.
Whereas Darla was tacky, outdated, and frankly a little cringy to be around. But internally, she was incredibly loyal and brave.
And that connects right back to our initial theme of the Stepford facade. The suburbs look flawless and peaceful, but there's immense violence simmering underneath, just like foundation and concealer cover up scars and blemishes.
I really love how the book uses the literal beauty tools as weapons. We touched on this briefly with the sander and the shears, but I want to dive a little deeper into why that specific choice is so effective in horror.
Please do.
It works so well because it takes the deeply private rituals of womanhood and makes them public and violent. Think about it. Women pluck, they shave, they sand, they peel, they wax. We do all these inherently violent, painful things to our own bodies in the name of achieving beauty.
Right.
The killer simply takes that internalized violence and turns it outward onto others. The text suggests that the relentless pursuit of perfection is an inherently violent act.
That is a genuinely terrifying thought, and it ties so beautifully into the meta-horror aspect we discussed earlier. Jill is an author. She is desperately trying to write a horror story while actively living inside one.
And her ultimate revelation is that she was looking at the wrong subgenre the entire time. She thought she was living in a standard domestic thriller, the evil neighbor trope.
But she was actually trapped in a psychological slasher about inherited family trauma.
Speaking of trauma, we really have to talk about the final image of the book. It's not just about the murders being solved or the killer being caught. It is fundamentally about Jill reclaiming her own narrative.
Yes, the ending is beautiful. The final image is Jill holding her son, Tanner, and they are outside, just looking up at the stars together.
And she realizes she finally has a story to tell that is entirely her own. And that story is Dolls in Space.
Which brings us full circle back to her writer's block.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that metaphor of containment. The suburban house, the PTA rules, the societal expectations of motherhood, they are all rigid containers. Even the concept of a doll is just a container for society's projection of idealized womanhood.
But dolls in space.
Dolls in space are entirely free. They're floating in a vacuum. They are completely uncontained by gravity or by social expectations. They can't be hurt and they can't be modified.
It's a brilliant nod to the book she was trying to write the whole time. She finally achieved it metaphorically by surviving this ordeal.
It strongly suggests that she has finally broken the cycle of trauma. She isn't trapped inside the horror movie anymore. She isn't trapped in her mother's bloody closet anymore. She is finally looking up out into the vast void, and she's safe.
I really have to shout out the sheer creativity of the injuries one more time. I know it's incredibly gruesome, but that ice cream scoop detail, that is going to stick with me for a long time.
It is so effective precisely because it is absurd. It is so tailored to the specific personality of Kellen, the woman who constantly looked down on Darla. It is poetic justice twisted into pure body horror.
And the sander. Scalping someone with a Black & Decker sander. It is just so visceral. I mean, it makes you physically cringe just imagining the sound and the vibration of it.
Because it is industrial. It entirely dehumanizes the victim. It turns a living person into a piece of raw material. And frankly, that is exactly what the beauty industry often does. It treats human bodies as raw material that needs to be constantly processed, refined, and upgraded.
So, drawing all this together, what does this actually mean for the listener? Why does Dollface matter beyond just being a really fun, bloody, fast-paced read?
I think it matters immensely because it takes the everyday mean girl trope and pushes it to its absolute logical extreme. We have all felt judged at some point. We've all felt that crushing pressure to fit into a certain aesthetic or social group.
Absolutely.
This book asks a terrifying question. What happens when that pressure finally breaks you? And perhaps more importantly, it forces us as readers to closely examine our own judgments.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Because we absolutely judge Darla right alongside the mean girls. The book deliberately forces us to judge her. We cringe at her clothes. We cringe at her desperation to be liked. We naturally align ourselves with the tasteful, wealthy people.
And then the author violently punishes the tasteful people and ultimately rewards the woman with bad taste. It forces the reader to confront their own inherent snobbery. Why do we automatically assume the poor woman in the acid-washed jeans is the deranged killer? Why do we blindly trust the pretty, wealthy influencer with the perfect makeup?
It is a profound lesson in empathy, brilliantly wrapped up in a bloody satirical slasher package.
And it's also a lesson in checking your sources, psychologically speaking. Jill was so thoroughly convinced by the logic of her murder board that she completely missed the horrific truth standing right in front of her.
She was only looking for a narrative that neatly fit her preconceived expectations, rather than looking objectively at the reality of her situation.
Which is a very human mistake to make, especially when you are dealing with deep-seated trauma. You instinctively look for the threats you easily recognize. Jill recognized the evil neighbor threat from 100 different movies.
But she didn't recognize the psychotic sister threat.
Because that was way too close to home. It was simply too painful for her to admit that the person she had sworn to protect was actually the monster hurting people.
Wow. So we started this deep dive with a horror author moving to the suburbs, expecting a classic Stepford Wives scenario. And we ended with a profound deconstruction of sisterhood, sanity, and the incredibly high, sometimes fatal cost of perfection.
And a whole lot of ruined makeup along the way.
Truly. Dollface by Lindy Ryan is just a wild, wild ride. It is funny, it is gross, and it is surprisingly touching at its core.
It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the scariest thing in the world isn't the monster hiding under the bed. It's the face staring back at you in the mirror.
Or, the face staring back at you in your sister's creepy makeup tutorial.
That too. Definitely that too.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We all live in a world that is heavily filtered through social media. We are constantly, relentlessly told to fix ourselves, to manifest a better life, to literally contour away our perceived physical flaws.
But at what point does fixing ourselves cross the line and become a literal form of self-destruction?
And how well do you really know the person holding the camera?
It is definitely a question worth asking yourself.
So check your own murder boards, listeners. Maybe be just a little bit nicer to the neighbor with the weird hobbies. And for the love of horror, if someone ever offers you a makeover and pulls out a paper cutter blade run,
and maybe just avoid the apple bobbing barrel at the next school carnival just to be safe.
Very solid advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Dollface. We will catch you in the next one.
Stay spooky.